2 minutes, 16 seconds. Yes, that familiar time period returns as we blast our way to victory in this 1977 launch title for the Atari 2600, Air Sea Battle. Also known as the pack-in for the Sears Video Arcade as Target Fun. Background viewing. There are quite a few reviews and retrospectives of this game on YouTube, and I have some internal conflict over which one to suggest to you. I've linked to Atari Archive and No Swear Gamer multiple times in the past, and both deliver, as with all games, great information about this title, and they'd be excellent supplemental content. That said, I'd like to provide some variety when I link to other creators, so for this title, I'd like to go with the very entertaining Classic Game Rooms coverage of Air Sea Battle. The review is 15 years old, according to YouTube, but it still holds up today. I truly love this guy's dry wit. Extremely funny. So give their video a view, then come back here for the 999 experience. Basics. Air Sea Battle is a 1 or 2 player vertical shooter. The Atari 2600 has no shortage of vertical shooters, and Air Sea Battle is one of them. As a launch title, it satisfies the need of 1977 gamers to destroy everything. It's not the best of this genre. Very few early releases can say that, though. But can it deliver? With 27 game modes, surely there's something that stands out. Game modes. Games 1 through 6 are anti-aircraft games, 7 through 12 are torpedo games, 13 through 15 is the shooting gallery, 16 through 18, Polaris. 19 through 21 are the bomber games, and 22 through 27 are Polaris versus Bomber. Wrap that up nicely. Oh, what is the meaning of everything I just said? Yeah, it's mostly just gibberish without a better explanation. Here's my attempt. In the anti-aircraft game modes, you are a stationary shooter with the ability to change the angle of your shot. Up on the joystick to shoot at 30 degrees, neutral to shoot at 60, and down to shoot at 90. I forgot to mention what you're shooting at. Oh yeah. Planes, jets, helicopters, the usual airborne culprits from the pre-Space Invaders era. For games 1 through 3, each target is worth a lone point. In games 4 through 6, scoring depends on the target you hit. Small jet equals 4 points, large jet 3 points, helicopter 2 points, and the 747 1 point. Now, shooting down passenger aircraft is likely to bring you into legal trouble. And this brings us to today's totally legitimate sponsor. Are you seeking legal assistance? Well, seek no longer. Lionel Hutz works on a contingency basis and will represent you with no money down. Right? The observation blimps are worth 0 points and behave like obstructions. You can avoid them, wait them out, or blast them out of your way to have a clear shot at point-worthy targets, but you will not earn or get penalized for doing so. Games 2 and 5 are the guided missiles version of these games. Games 3 and 6 are the one-player equivalents, and I'll cover the one-player modes in more depth a little later. In the torpedo games, you are a submarine, supposedly. Now the joystick controls your horizontal position and does not affect shot angle. Each player, or player versus CPU, is confined to their half of the screen. For games 7 through 9, each target is worth 1 point. In 10 through 12, there's a comparable scoring system to the 4 through 6 of the anti-aircraft mode. You're merely shooting at seacraft instead of aircraft, and the mines take the slot of the balloons. 8 and 11 have guided missiles, and 9 and 12 are versus the computer. In Shooting Gallery, you not only control the angle of your shots, but you can also position your sprite along the horizontal axis. The targets can change direction in this mode, making it feel, to some degree, that you are at a fair or carnival, playing one of those shooting games that are often found there, or at least were often found there in the late 1970s. Your targets are rabbits, ducks, and clowns, each with its own point value. I seem to recall hearing that the rabbits were originally dogs, but at the request of Sears, these sprites were changed to rabbits. I wonder wonder if any manuals were printed with dogs instead. What an interesting relic that would be. Game 14 is with guided missiles, and 15 is the one-player mode. Polaris and/or Bomber, the non-versus games. In these game modes, you control your speed of travel. Backwards for slow, neutral for default, and forward for fast. In Polaris, you can control a ship at the bottom of the playfield. The bottommost ship is the player plugged into the right controller socket. It follows the 4-3-2-1 scoring system from games 4 through 6. Game 17 is with guided missiles, and 18 is versus a computer. In Bomber, you pilot a plane at the top of the screen. Right controller controls the lower of the two. It's effectively Polaris, but your targets are beneath you, as opposed to above you. Game 20 for guided missiles and 21 for single-player action. In Polaris versus Bomber, the left player controls the Bomber and the right player controls the Polaris. This is a direct 1v1 matchup, pitting you against your opponent. Each hit is worth 1 point. Games 25 through 27 include mines, as always, worth 0 points, acting as obstructions, while games 23 and 26 are the guided missile variants. Game modes 24 and 27 pit you against the computer. Okay, that was a lot to go over, but now I won't need to elaborate on any of the vocabulary for the rest of this review. Huh? I didn't explain guided missiles? Ah, for the everlo... Just figure it out, okay? My youthful experience. It is possible I played this game at the home of a friend when I was very young, but I have no specific memories of it. It either left 0 impression on me, or I simply hadn't experienced it. As a youngster, I'm not sure how much I would have enjoyed this. Playing this with a friend would have been a decent experience, but I had access to many vertical shooters, even on the 2600, that this game just does not compete well against. Alone or with someone, there were just better options for me if I needed to scratch the vertical shooter itch. Look. It looks decent. We haven't entered the realm of 2600 sprite flicker, so that's a non-factor. Most sprites look pretty good by 1977 standards. The gradient on the background is okay. It's a far cry from the Activision sunset, but it's nice to have something other than a solid background, typically black, in an early 2600 release. The submarines take a bit more imagination to recognize than most sprites, but overall, it has a decent look. Sound. Pretty standard for the console and the time period. The iconic 2600 explosions provide some nostalgia. It doesn't sound anything like a real-world explosion, but Atari gamers know, instantaneously, that in the 2600 universe, that sound is an explosion. The typical bleeps and bloops that pepper numerous games from this era are present. They don't create any awe, but more importantly, are not annoying. Does it add to the experience? A little bit. I'll score the sound as acceptable. Gameplay. The controls are fine. There is, as usual, an acclimation period. Understanding the angled shots and timing your shots take a decent amount of practice and understanding. You will miss many shots in your early experience with this game. And with only one shot per player, allowed on the screen at a time, there's a significant period of growing pains getting comfortable with the controls. The guided missiles game modes do allow for correction, fancy shots, and are incredibly helpful. The difficulty switch will affect the size of your projectiles. Larger shots is easier, but the advantage is negligible for beginners and irrelevant for experts. The half-screen game modes are a bit frustrating. It often feels like I would just need a tiny little bit more room to get off another decent shot. But overall, the controls are fine. There's nothing amazing here, but nothing so detrimental that it ruins the game. There doesn't appear to be any glaring glitches or serious problem areas in the gameplay, although I admittedly did not do any glitch hunting for this title. I did not come across anything spectacularly bad from a few hours of general gameplay. Other. It should be noted that this game was released before any true standardization of player 1 equals left controller port had been fully established. While with most 2600 games, the one-player controller is on the left, or in some really ambitious games uses both ports. This one bucks the eventual trend by having one-player games controlled by the joystick plugged into the right port. So if you go directly to a one-player game and think your cartridge is broken, maybe take this into consideration. It's easy to forget, especially after decades of conditioning to the contrary. The one-player experience. Yet again, we have a game that is a much better experience with a human opponent. It does offer one-player game modes, but the CPU effort is comically bad. It just fires nonstop, not even trying. And to make matters worse, none of the one-player game modes come with guided missile options. However, big brain move time. Because the CPU is so limited, you can easily simulate it. Select a two-player option with guided missiles and hold down the fire button on one controller to simulate the CPU AI. Either with your toe or a vice grip, heck, even a sturdy rubber band. And playing the game is normal with your other controller. It's such a silly workaround, but it allows you to play with guided missiles against an opponent whose gameplay is indistinguishable from that of the computer. To be perfectly honest, even with one-player game modes and this guided missile life hack, the game just isn't very enjoyable to me as a one-player game. It's definitely better with a human opponent, but even that gets stale before exploring all the game modes. If your human opponent is comparably skilled, it does make the experience more fulfilling. But in my opinion, this just lacks that special something that would elevate it to a vertical shooter for the 2600 in the realm of the good ones. Who would like this? There are a lot of people who grew up with this game and have nostalgia for it. If you are one of these people, you don't need me to tell you that it holds a special place in your heart. For everyone, nearly everyone else, I suspect time spent on this game will only have limited moments of enjoyability. Cartridges are very abundant, so if the price is right or you have a copy collecting dust and someone who wants to play with you, go ahead and pop it in. It has some value as a party game, well, in the bragging rights over irrelevant skills subtext. And while there is fun to be had with this game, it is sparse, and you really need that perfect storm for this game to deliver a high entertainment value in exchange for the time you invest in it. Relevance today. As one of the original 9 launch titles, Air Sea Battle holds up pretty well. But compared to later vertical shooters that would flood the 2600, its destiny to skirt the fringes of obscurity seem locked in place. Compilations for 2600 titles are abundant and come out frequently, and Air Sea Battle is a mainstay in nearly all of these. It's cheap to re-release, and there's a nostalgic contingent of consumers that still seek it out to some degree. I feel it is included in the collections more for historical purposes than as a driving factor in increasing sales. But regardless of the reason, it's going to continue to come out time after time on these flashback consoles and game compilations, whatever their equivalents in the future will be, for as long as there's a market for classic Atari titles. Overall, Air Sea Battle is okay. There seem to be two major camps of people when it comes to reviewing this title. Those that loved it as a kid, who rate it high, and those who didn't, that don't. I'm sure you can find counterexamples of both of these, but those tend to be the exception. I love me a good vertical shooter, and to me, Air Sea Battle misses the mark. There are just too many better, in my opinion, vertical shooters on this console for Air Sea Battle to be a time consumer in this genre. Will I play it with a friend if the opportunity presents itself? Most likely. Will it be something we will bond over for more than a half an hour? Unlikely. Next. Did Coleco sabotage their home port of a big-name game for another console? See you next mission.